From Dubai, we are joined by Bhavik Mehta, Deputy Head Research at Century Financial. Welcome, Bhavik. Thank you for being with us. Bhavik, first and foremost, before we talk about Donald Trump's threats, let's talk about the idea that a unified currency for BRICS, is it implementable away from all the criticism or fears around it?
First of all, thank you very much, Mohammed, for having me on this show. Now, it's actually very premature to talk about a unified BRICS currency at this kind of union, because if you look at the overall composition of the BRICS nations, we have nations like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. To be very fair, nations like India and China, not friendly. Russia, again, is considered to be a very dominant power as far as oil exports are concerned. There's a lot of threat regarding the Russian expansion into Ukraine as well as the other USSR nations. So the union as such, that is, if you talk about the BRICS, it seems to be more of a anti-dollar, anti-US union more than any other common objective. So to actually establish the fact that it's going to be a successful currency union creation is a bit of a premature to talk at this point of time, because each and every nation has a different motive. So that's where I think things are going to get very tricky and complicated.
If it's premature, or even if the idea is almost impossible, and we have an example in Europe about how monetary and fiscal policies can cause issues that the Eurozone is still suffering from, why Trump seems to be concerned? Why is he talking about this as a threat?
So if you go back to the, I think 2 months back, we had the Kazan Declaration of BRICS, where President Putin of Russia had hosted all the major BRIC nations. They had explicitly talked about a joint statement wherein they are going to make use of local currencies more for their particular imports and exports. So in my view, what has really happened is Trump as his own personality is very well known, bullying and intimidating. He wants to make clear to this BRICS nation specifically that he would not allow them to basically even go for the local currency swaps. So we've had examples of Chinese yuan, Russian ruble, and Indian currencies being used for oil import and export. So Trump's message is very clear that if you want a favorable support from the US side, you will have to use dollar for your particular cross-border transaction and not the local currencies.
So this is the same point, Bhavik. Let's suppose China now is buying something from Russia in ruble, it happened with the latest sanctions. What will China do with this ruble that they have accumulated, because they cannot use it in purchasing anything outside Russia? So it's the same issue, is it not? It's still the same thing applies to the rest of the countries. So the bilateral trade or exchange of commodities in local currencies is not big for BRICS. BRICS still cannot implement that on a large scale because many factors, including what you talked about. So does Trump find anything concerning really, or is it just a statement for a local consumption in his campaign?
So as you've rightly mentioned, back of the mind, every global investor, even the state head, knows that talks about replacing dollars are very much premature. What Trump is basically doing is he's trying to play out to his voter base that US is still the superpower. So if you go back a few months back in May and June, there was a lot of the story regarding de-dollarization that was being specifically out in the media from the China and Russia side. So after winning the campaign, after winning the presidential election, Trump wants to make it clear to the world as well as his voter base that US is still the superpower, dollar still remains the favorite currency, because as you've mentioned, 60% of the transactions, 60 to 70% of the global cross-border flows are dollar denominated. So it seems more as a political rhetoric as compared to the actual threat that the Trump administration is actually feeling.
But on the other hand, Bhavik, many more statements, more trade protectionism. You cannot have a currency which is the one dominating global trade, and it is the world reserve because of this trade and these commodities. And at the same time, you are exercising protectionist policies and you are trying to isolate the US by imposing more tariffs and more customs. In itself, this weakens the dollar position. Do you think this is now perceived by Trump or his administration?
So, in order to support the data that I'm about to say as to why this has always worked in the favor of US, that is imposition of tariffs from the US side, I would like to take back to the cycle of 2018 and 19, when Trump imposed like 15 or 20% tariffs on almost like 300 to 400 billion dollars of goods. That actually had a depreciation impact on the Chinese yuan. The US dollar index appreciated something like 8 to 10% during that time. So, mind you, during this same period, we didn't see a huge increase in the inflation. The inflation actually increased due to the COVID crisis. So, contrary to the popular perception that it's the tariffs that the end consumer is going to pay, it didn't happen in the US last time. One interesting factor that we should be mindful of this point of time is Trump has talked about increasing tariffs to the rate of 50 to 60%. Now, these are the rates that the world has not seen since last many decades. So, what exact impact it's going to have on the inflation is yet to be known. But in a scenario where the existing range is hiked to 10% to 20%, we do not see much of a deteriorating impact on the US economy as the whole.
Bhavik Mehta, Deputy Head Research at Century Financial. Thank you very much for these valuable insights, your contribution,
Thank you.
and time. Have a great day.